Welcome into a Monday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Nick Whalen, Alex Barutha here with you. We're talking week one takeaways. We're talking waiver wire pickups. We're talking guys we're thinking about dropping already a week into the season. Alex, a ton to get to. Quick apology, by the way. We had a bit of a tech issue when we first tried to start the stream like 10 minutes ago. So hopefully everybody makes their way over here. We apologize for any minor inconvenience, but a lot to get to, Alex. We have injuries to keep track of. We have some schedule notes for the week ahead. And the Golden State Warriors, who have run some interesting rotations, to say the least, over this first week. Now likely to be without Steph Curry for at least a couple of games. I think there's some back and forth as far as how serious the injury is. We saw Curry limping off the court last night, came back into the game, barely, lasted like 10 seconds and had to go back to the locker room. It sounds like they believe the ankle issue is relatively minor. But I don't think, in any weekly lineup leagues, I'm locking Steph Curry in tonight.
No, I wouldn't. I was watching that game when he got hurt. I was kind of worried he was like an Achilles or something at first, the way he ended up on the bench. He was stretching it. He sat out and then came in and sprained it again and then was visibly frustrated when he left the court. So, yeah, if you have Steph Curry in your fantasy leagues, I have him in one. I would just assume that he's out for this week. The bigger question, obviously, is like, what are the Warriors going to do without him? Because they've been running a really deep rotation. They've been in two blowout games, which is important to mention. Like their first game, 140-104 against Portland. The second game, 127-86 against Utah. So there's some rotation anomalies there. But, obviously, like guard-wise, we're going to get more Melton, more Podziemski, more Hield probably. But I will say, watching that Clippers game, the guy who was handling the ball late and trying to make plays for Golden State was Andrew Wiggins.
It sure was. I had a feeling that's where we were going here. That was probably the most replicable game as far as, trying to find real rotation takeaways. And then, of course, you lose Curry. So that kind of throws that into a tizzy. And, Steve Kerr said after opening night, it's like, yeah, we'd love to use this 10 to 12 man rotation every night. We'll see. It's a little LeBron minutes limity to me, where it's like, yeah, ideally you'd be doing this, and ideally you're blowing out the Trailblazers by 35 every night, and it makes it pretty easy to play 12 guys when you're doing that. But when push comes to shove, is Steph Curry going to be playing 28 minutes in a one-score game where he's fully healthy? I don't know that he will. We're getting a lot of questions already about Brandon Podziemski. Christian says, should I drop Podziemski for Miles McBride in a 12-team category league? I don't think so. I mean, the minutes thing is a little concerning, but obviously the potential absence of Steph Curry here, I want Brandon Podziemski at least for this week. And I want to see how this Warriors rotation develops, after more than 3 games.
Yes, I agree. This is not the time to drop Podziemski with Curry out. Like get your money's worth out of Podziemski while Curry is sidelined. And McBride, like Knicks have only played 2 games. He had a hot first game. Second game, he cooled off a bit. He's going to have to play a decent amount for New York, but he's not necessarily like a high usage player. But I would hang on to Podziemski, especially right now.
Yeah, and Miles McBride, dealing with a minor knee issue right now as well. We've only seen 2 Knicks games, so to me, it's still really early on a lot of these guys. I think we know that, but obviously you want to act, as soon as you can. Like, Onyeka Okongwu comes out with like the best game of his career on opening night, and all of a sudden now he's sitting out the second night of a back-to-back to begin the week. We don't love that. I was really excited to get him back in the lineup this week, and still might in some leagues, but a 4-game week becomes a 3-gamer for him. Any guys that you found yourself targeting, across all your leagues on the waiver wire, or did you have any obvious drops, guys you expected to be rostering for more than a half a week?
I will say, on the ad side, Christian Braun is someone I think you have to consider. We were sort of unsure about the role he would play if he'd be up to the task in Denver. And it's just like Denver looks incredibly thin right now. They are just going to need him to play 30 to 35 minutes a game. His defensive stats are probably going to regress. And then I don't know, Dennis Schroder. I mean, if your league is shallow enough, I think Schroder is someone to pick up off the waiver wire. He's looked pretty good so far, 21 points, 6 assists a game. And then if you're in a deep league, I think people are looking towards like Jay Huff.
Oh yeah.
Jordan Hawkins, Scotty Pippen. Like these are all guys who I think have been fine pickups thus far.
Yeah, I was surprised to see where Schroeder's roster rate is. Like even after being the second most added player yesterday in Yahoo leagues, he's still only 47% rostered. In every deep league, he should be out there. I mean, I know he was a target for you and I. he's off to exactly the start that I think we thought he would be, right? He's playing a ton of minutes. He's taking a ton of shots. He's got 2 20-point games already. He's had at least 6 assists in every game. He's got a steal in every game so far. And I still think the Nets and the Wizards are going to be the 2 worst teams in the NBA, but the Nets have been competitive so far. I mean, they took it to the Milwaukee Bucks last night. They played Atlanta close on opening night. So I don't think, at some point this year, maybe there just becomes a, what are we doing playing Dennis Schroder 35 minutes a night conversation? Do we want to turn it over to younger guys? But I think for at least the first couple months of the season, like the Nets are going to attempt to be as competitive as they can. And that only helps Schroder.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned it with Cam Thomas. That man is firing away. Schroder. I don't know what they're doing. Like the rest of the rotation is kind of hit or miss.
Yeah.
It's like, what are we getting out of Clowney? Like if he doesn't make his corner threes, he's not giving you a ton. And Jalen Wilson played a ton in the first game, hasn't really been in the mix or worth rostering since. I thought he might be someone that could stick around. But you're right. They played the Bucks really well the last night, and so did the Bulls when the Bucks lost to the Bulls.
Yeah, I want to stick mostly to fantasy, so we don't, we don't do like a 15-minute soliloquy on Milwaukee. But the Bucks look rough. They've looked rough these last 2 games. It's really haven't even been all that competitive. Defensively, they've struggled. Really struggling to find anything, outside of Dame and Giannis offensively. And Giannis had 2 fouls early on last night, so that kind of knocked them off course a bit. But a rough end of the week certainly for Milwaukee. Norman Powell has been fantastic. He's somebody that, I grabbed in a bunch of leagues, and he's still widely available in shallower formats. He's going to play a ton of minutes, man. He played 40 on opening night against Phoenix. That was an overtime game, but still, was going to play in the mid-30s regardless. Put up 37 against Denver and then followed up with 20 last night. I mean, he might take 7, 8 3-pointers per game for this team. Like, I think what we've seen from the Clippers so far is kind of how this is going to go. And they're 2-1. I'm not feeling great about my Clippers under necessarily right now. They've been able to remain really competitive. James Harden, I think, is kind of embracing the direction of this team. And my goodness, man, Ivica Zubac is off to a fantastic start. He's already had like two of the 3 best fantasy games of his last couple of years, just in the last week. He's been so good.
I wish I had more Zubac. A thought I had last night watching this Clippers Warriors game was that I think we should have, maybe like the general fantasy collective. You and I were talking about people are drafting Zach Edey in like the 6th round.
Yeah.
I think we should have maybe pushed harder on like Zubac is probably the guy you want Edey to be.
Right.
And that like you should just grab Zubac in the 6th if you were going to grab Edey in the 6th. But he's played opening night, he played 34 minutes, next night 39, next night 38. I mean, he's playing 10 more minutes per game than he has in the past.
That is the big thing, right? Per minute wise, like he's still playing really well per minute. But he was a 26 minute per game guy last year. And it really looks like early on for a team that doesn't really have a backup center, it's just Mo Bamba. It looks like he's going to be 33, 34 minutes as long as he can stay out of foul trouble. He actually fouled out on opening night, so probably would have played more than 34 minutes, but has done a good job to avoid that these last 2 games. So yeah, Zubac certainly looking like an early winner. We got a question about Zach Edey from Machiavelli the Don. He said, what are we doing about Zach Edey? Strong preseason, but thus far his play has been unacceptable, Alex, which it has. He has picked up 14 fouls in 51 total minutes?
Yeah, it's just the fouls for me. That's the main problem. If he can cut that back and get up to 24 to 26 minutes a game, I think everything we said about him in the preseason and everything we saw from him in the preseason essentially reigns true. But he's just got, I think, getting used to the speed of like regular season NBA basketball against the real opposing team's rotations. It's just going to take some time. I would say don't drop him yet. Mm-hmm. I would say keep him on your bench as long as you can.
Yeah, I did a video for our YouTube channel, which you can, of course, find on the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball YouTube late last week. And this was after most teams had only played 1 game. A couple had played 2. But it was guys that I wish I had on more teams already. Zubac was far and away number 1, and he's just only gotten better since opening night. Onyeka Okongwu on there as well. It's like I'm starting to feel like maybe this is the year that he just kind of gets the handoff from Clint Capella. The minutes have crept up each of the last couple of years. But even on opening night, like they're closing with Onyeka Okongwu. Capella's off the court for the final 8 minutes. So maybe Capella still gets the ceremonial start. But I think, I think fantasy-wise, Okongwu might end up being that guy going forward. Again, if you're just tuning in, Okongwu out tonight just for rest purposes on the second night of a back-to-back. Another Atlanta Hawk who made that list, Alex, is Dyson Daniels. He's only 62% rostered right now in Yahoo. Decent chance he might be out there in your league. You're really just looking for the defensive stats more than anything, but shooting the three well so far to begin the year. I thought he was pretty aggressive over those first 2 games. He was an efficient scorer, not a guy who's going to take a lot of difficult shots, but already has racked up 8 steals and 4 blocks through 3 games.
And that's been the thing with Daniels. I mean, that was his calling card coming out of the draft, was like, hey, this is someone with elite defensive potential who, maybe his scoring is not up to his scoring won't be amazing, but he can pass the ball and he's got good size. And I think that's bore out. He's not going to have the opportunity probably to pass as much with Trae Young running the show, but I fully expect Daniels, like, again, if he's getting 30 minutes a night, I think he averaged 2.5 steals or close to 2.5 steals per 36 last year. And so like he's going to get value for you.
Yeah. And it helps that DeAndre Hunter's banged up, Bogdanovic has missed a couple games already.
Yes.
So that's part of it. But I still think, he's going to play mid-20s at minimum most nights and maybe creep closer to 30 on a lot of nights. I mean, he was number 1 in the NBA in steal rate last year. Didn't play quite enough minutes to qualify, but that's a 62 game sample. It's not like he played 12 games last year. Like he is that dude, as far as steals go. Getting some questions about Jonathan Kuminga. Skeeter says, thoughts on Kuminga for a 12-team head-to-head league? Is he a drop? Who's a better hold between Kuminga and Hachimura with Jared Vanderbilt, coming back to the Lakers in the near future? You're the Kuminga guy, Alex. You're the primary shareholder. I think you're holding like 70% of the Kuminga float this year. So I'll let you weigh in on this one.
Kuminga, pretty underwhelming in preseason and has been very underwhelming in the regular season so far. Like I said, I watched the last 18 minutes of that Clippers Warriors game live. He's just out there not doing anything. He's just completely forget he's on the court a lot. He doesn't seem to have improved meaningfully as a playmaker, as a shooter, really just anything. He's gotten some decent defensive stats so far. I will say the minutes are super low. You're going to look at his minutes per game, you're going to see 19.7. But like we talked about, Warriors have been in some blowouts. They're running a deep rotation. I would hang on to him, especially because Curry's out. If you're asking whether he's a better hold than Hachimura, Kuminga has more upside than Hachimura, but Hachimura I think is a good high floor guy. And honestly, at this point, it's a position that could easily Hachimura could be the better fantasy player in 2 weeks. It could just be clear at that point.
Right. So like we mentioned, you have a lot of Kuminga. You also have a lot of LaMelo Ball. That's looking pretty good so far, Alex. And we knew if he would stay healthy, he could be an elite producer, but he has been fantastic so far for the Charlotte Hornets. I'm getting some ROI on CJ McCollum as well, who's been a top 15 guy somehow. DeJounte Murray injury, of course, benefiting him. But anybody else who, is a high rostered player for you, who you're either feeling great about or feeling terrible about, one way or the other through a week?
I have a lot of Trae Young as well. LaMelo and Trae Young were my sort of, hey, if you're drafting at the back end of the first, just take these guys instead of the other sort of, I guess, more injury prone vets like Kevin Durant. Trying to think some other high roster guys. I took a lot of Ingram. That's paying off right now. We'll see how that continues throughout the season. But I think those are sort of my early payoffs.
Yeah. Yeah, I've hit pretty good on Buddy Hield so far, who was terrible last night, but put up 10 threes in 40 total minutes over the first 2 games. So we'll see. I think we know what we're signing up for there. Sengun has put up one of the what might be his best game of the season, and then what might be his worst game of the season. So we're kind of neutral there. Talked about Zubac. I mean, I think Zach LaVine, again, much like LaMelo, you kind of know what to expect when he's healthy. We'll see long term. I'm never going to be thrilled with Zach LaVine's health outlook, but I think he's looked great. It's been a long time since we've seen Zach LaVine, and he's been as aggressive as ever. He's shooting the 3 really well so far. Bulls have been a fun team to watch.
I will say on Sengun, I think that bad game was a Wembanyama problem. They just Ime Udoka just ended up going like a Jabari Smith at center run for a lot of that game, and they play again tonight, Spurs Rockets. So I would keep an eye on that. Could be. I would not be shocked if Sengun had another sort of low minute game. But you mentioned with LaVine, they looked. I mean, some of this is that we talked about the Bucks before. They looked unstoppable, the Bulls against the Bucks, where it's just open three after open three after open three. And like, I don't think anybody has, I don't think anybody doesn't believe that LaVine can put up good fantasy numbers when he's healthy and he's playing real minutes and in this situation. So yeah, if you drafted him up to this point, you're obviously feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah, it's just going to be a waiting game with LaVine as far as, how long can he stay healthy. Do you have any interest in Gradey Dick? He's somebody that, I think especially in deeper leagues, there's going to be a lot of Gradey Dick ads. His roster rate in Yahoo leagues, which do tend to be a little bit shallower, didn't jump as much as I thought it would. I mean, it really is just points and some threes. He had 4 threes the other night, but despite being a white shooting guard, Alex, he's not like a crazy high volume 3-point shooter. This isn't a Kyle Korver situation. He is just kind of more of an overall scorer, not a high assist player, really doesn't rebound at all, despite being a plus athlete and having good size. But Toronto's been a really tough team to figure out so far. So quickly goes out midway through the opener, hasn't played since. RJ Barrett is yet to play. They got a couple bench pieces, Olynyk and Bruce Brown, who haven't played yet, and they've been involved in a couple of blowouts. So that's a team that I'm still approaching with some level of caution.
Yeah, there's a lot of variance there. Like we had a big Jonathan Mobo game that was that caused a lot of people to panic, I guess in a positive way. But yeah, like you said, Gradey Dick's only giving you points, and with Quickly and Barrett out, those points are going to dry up in theory. So I don't mind an ad if you need points, I don't mind an ad. But don't be shocked if you drop him like next week, if Barrett and Quickly come back and then he's averaging like 11 points a game.
Our friend Alan says, is Alex Caruso a drop in a 14-team category league? OKC kind of on the other end of the spectrum from Toronto, a team that's been involved in 3 blowouts, but it's been on the right side of those.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say he's a hold. That's a short answer. I think if you drafted Caruso, you basically only drafted him for steals and blocks, like just a defensive guy. And through, he's averaging 1.7 steals and 1.3 blocks in 21 minutes. And you mentioned the blowouts. So if the games get a little more competitive, now OKC is going to be in a lot of blowouts because they're really good. If you start seeing 26, 27 minutes a game, I think the defensive stats will still be there. I think he's a hold. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you said it, man. I mean, he's got 5 steals and 4 blocks over the last 2 games. Didn't really do a whole lot in the opener against Denver, but that's what you're asking for, right? You didn't pick up Caruso hoping for 15 points per game and 5 rebounds and 5 assists. I mean, you're taking him with the 110th pick or whatever, specifically for those 2 categories. He was a great 3-point shooter last year too, and we'll see where the volume ultimately settles. But it's really steals, blocks, and threes, and to get like 1 block per game out of a guard like that is huge as well. So I think he's right where he should be right now. We are seeing a lot of Case and Wallace too, for OKC, and they do similar things. So, maybe Caruso doesn't take this big step forward in terms of minutes played, and if anything could regress, but I think he's given you about what you'd expect so far. We mentioned Scotty Pippen Jr. briefly at the top of the pod. Skeeter asked, is Scotty Pippen worth a standard league pickup despite only playing 20 minutes a night? I mean, he's the most added player in Yahoo over the weekend, which really shouldn't surprise you. John Morant is questionable for tonight's game. I would imagine he probably plays, but Scottie Pippen's played at least 22 minutes in all 3 of these games so far.
Yeah, and he's someone who last year showed us what he could do in somewhat limited time. 25 minutes a game last year, 13 and 5 with 1.7 steals. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would pick him up and just roll with it for as long as he's hot. Like, this is a situation where if he's putting up better numbers than the worst player on your team, and you don't expect that player to like have a big bounce back, then like absolutely just add him and have it run. Because like, yes, Kennard's out, Vince Williams is out. You mentioned Morant's questionable, but Marcus Smart hasn't played that well. And if Marcus Smart continues not to play well, Scottie Pippen could start taking his minutes. Like, this is a team just trying to win. Like, they're not trying to. So, like, if Pippen's doing this for them, he's gonna keep playing.
Got a question on Amen Thompson. Another disappointment so far, despite his obvious high upside in fantasy. There may be too many cooks in the kitchen in Houston. So I want to talk about Amen, and then we could kind of roll this into Reed Sheppard as well, who not playing a ton of minutes for this Houston team. Maybe it shouldn't be that big of a surprise because they do have several cooks in that kitchen, specifically, on the wing and at the guard spots. And, like Memphis, I think this is a team that it's kind of been in a soft rebuild the last couple of years. Obviously for Memphis, it was accidental last season with all the injuries, but I think Houston is absolutely trying to push for a playoff spot. I don't think this is going to be necessarily let's make sure we get Reed Sheppard 25 minutes a night. Let's make sure we get Amen Thompson his looks. Like they just have so many guys. It's like Jalen Green is playing well. He's going to play a ton of minutes. Van Vliet's going to play a ton of minutes. Sengun's going to play minutes. Jabari Smith, Dylan Brooks is still going to get his 28 to 32 minutes. So what are you doing with Amen Thompson and with Reed Sheppard?
Amen, everything you said is right. Like they're so deep that they can run out. Like whoever is hot is going to play, and whatever matchup makes sense, those guys are going to be on the court. Like I mentioned with the game against the Spurs, Sengun wasn't on the court because he was not that effective for them that particular game. And they're like, okay, we'll run big with Jabari Smith, and do it that way. And Thompson, he's going to be hit or miss, man, because he can't shoot that well.
Yep.
He wants to be active with the ball. Like he's going to get you your rebounds and your defensive stats. I know he only has one block. I would consider him like a soft hold.
Yeah.
If something pops up, like if you're in a shallower, like 10-team league, he's probably a drop. Sheppard is just really, he's basically in the same situation, but playing fewer minutes. Like to me, Sheppard is just a straight up drop. Unless like maybe you're in a 16-team league, but even then it's like you're really probably just banking on an injury to Fred VanVleet or something.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And maybe that injury comes at some point. It's like Sheppard is the guy that I'm terrified to drop because if that opportunity is there, I think he could really take off. And it's like you feel like the moment you drop him, that injury comes and all of a sudden he's playing 25 minutes. But it's, with as deep as the league is right now and depending on what your format is, like it's pretty hard to roster a guy who's looking at like 5 to 12 minutes a night at this point. So I think Sheppard has to be at least a consideration. Got some Nicolas Claxton questions, Alex, who's kind of been on a soft minutes limit. He's played increasingly more minutes in each of the 3 games so far, but 15, 20, and 22 minutes respectively. Paul asks a trade question involving Claxton. He says, Claxton for Jaden Ivey and Onyeka Okongwu. Is that a fair deal? He says he's also thinking about selling high on Zubac and Jeremy Grant. I'm telling you, I wouldn't sell Zubac. I really wouldn't. Grant, for sure. Just one of those guys who, he'll have his weeks where all of a sudden he looks like a top 50 player, but he always finishes lower than you think. He doesn't play late in the season. Portland's just kind of a sinking ship in general. But we'll start on the Claxton stuff.
Claxton is just not that involved. Like you said, he's on a minutes limit, and that's some of it. But they're just not getting him the ball in the pick and roll. They don't feed him in the post at all. It's just a lot of Cam Thomas, like shooting jumpers and Schroder. Like, I think it's going to be. I don't think Claxton is going to be in a. I don't think he's going to break out this season. Let's put it that way. Would you? I mean, I would take Okongwu plus Ivy for Claxton. I would take the 2 players for 1 in that situation, especially because Okongwu is just straight up. I would say straight up better than Claxton, but if they're going to get the same amount of minutes, Okongwu is probably going to be better in fantasy. And I'm with you. Don't Zubac. I would just ride that out because why is someone even trading you for Zubac at this point?
Yeah.
No one's going to trade you I don't even know what Jaylen Brown for Zubac. Yeah. And Grant. Yeah. I mean, Grant, if you can get like a top 60 player for Grant, I would do that. But it depends who's in your league and who knows Jeremy Grant's tendencies late in the season.
All right. We got a pick 2 for tonight's NBA slate question, presumably in a daily lineup league. Coulibaly, Camara, Braun, and Nikola Jovic. 4 studs here. This is a tough one, but I'll be interested to get your take.
I mean, the sort of gut feel is like just take Coulibaly against the fast-paced Hawks.
Yeah.
And he's playing a lot of minutes and doing more stuff. And then I would take Braun. I don't know why I can't say it. Brown. Every time I think I'm saying it the right way. Brown against the Raptors. Raptors aren't very good. Like we talked about at the top of the show, they really need him out there playing 30 minutes, and he's been hot so far.
Yeah, I think as far as like your last starting spot goes, or your last 2 spots, like these are all reasonable options. Jovic has played big minutes so far for the Heat. We started to see that last season. He's already taken 12 threes over the last 2 games, and Coulibaly looked bad in the opener, had a great second game, and Toumani Camara is somebody that I found myself putting bids in for this weekend in some of my deeper leagues. I kind of wondered, like, would he still be part of this rotation? Portland was a team that just kind of fell apart health-wise last season. And obviously the answer so far has been yes. They're kind of going with this, larger lineup to start. I mean, I always think of Camara as more of a wing or even like a 4, and they're essentially starting him at the 2 right now, bringing Scoot off the bench, moving Simons down to the point guard spot. And, I think there's an argument to be made that like night to night floor, I think Camara is, I wouldn't say he's quite the safest, but like, I think he has a higher night to night floor than Coulibaly, for example, who is like, feels like more of a boom or bust guy. And, I think I would go, I think I would go Camara and Braun. I don't know. It's tough. So you said your official choice would be Coulibaly and Braun?
Coulibaly and Braun, because to me, if this is like the last spot in your daily moves league, like I want to shoot for upside. Like these guys are only on my bench for upside. So I would play Coulibaly and Braun.
We did get official confirmation, by the way. Steph Curry will not play in the Warriors' next game tomorrow night. No surprise there. And that'll essentially be day to day. We've gotten a few Herb Jones questions. Is Herb Jones 12-team roto-worthy right now, Alex? You and I did a few auction leagues, and it felt like there was like a Herb Jones bidding war breaking out in all of those.
Is he 12-team roto-worthy? He's a hold because again, he's another guy where it's like Caruso. If you drafted him, the reason you drafted him is for steals and blocks. And he's got 2 steals in each of his 3 games.
Yeah.
And he's got 1 block. And, obviously, like you'd hope he'd do a little bit more offensively. And he's only 1 for 9 right now from 3. That's going to pick up as well. So he's a hold.
Should I drop Kelly Olynyk in a 16-team 9-category league?
I actually have Kelly Olynyk in our 16-team auction league. So I am primed to answer this question. If you don't have an IR spot, because he's he's a candidate for my IR spot, I would hold because he's one of the best per minute guys like in the NBA that you could even grab off the waiver wire in theory. And we don't know his role because he hasn't played yet. But if Barnes misses any time, if Pirtle misses any time, it's going to be more Olynyk. And even if those guys don't miss time and Olynyk plays 20 minutes a night, he played 22 minutes a night last year and ranked 110th in 8-cat. So like that's 100% a guy you should have on your bench in 16-team.
I've got a trade question here. My Sengun and LaVine for SGA or my LaVine for Curry in a 12-team points league.
LaVine and Curry in points leagues are going to be way closer than you would think. I would probably take Curry there, but because they're both injury risks, right? So
yeah,
I would probably take Curry there between him and LaVine, but Sengun and LaVine for Shea is an interesting question. In a 12-team points league, I mean, you might be able to stream someone in off your, like week to week on a 4-game week that sort of makes up for the absence of Sengun and LaVine. But, at some point that's like a add up the fantasy points question. Yeah, that's a tough answer.
We'll go back to a Zach Edey question quickly, just to kind of tie the knot on this one. In a 12-team points league, are you willing to hold Zach Edey? Is he getting another week on the roster?
That's a 10-team points league.
10-team.
I don't think that's necessary because in a 10-team league, there's going to be guys on your waiver wire that you could stream in every week who are on 4-game weeks that average like 20 to 25 fantasy points a game. And that's kind of like what you were hoping for in drafting Edey was like 25, maybe 30 on a best case scenario. Yeah. So you don't have to hold him.
I also think there's a little bit lower upside going forward. Obviously, you have the foul concerns, but Jaren Jackson's back in the mix now. He made his debut over the weekend, and I think they just need Zach Edey a little bit less. So yeah, in a 10-teamer, I think it's justifiable to drop him. It's disappointing, but I think you can do it. Trade Colin Sexton for Dennis Schroder. I would do that. I'd take Schroder.
I would take Schroder. It's close. Like Sexton is not playing as many minutes. They've been in 2 blowouts, I'm pretty sure. And so, like, if he would play 30 minutes, it would probably end up being relatively close.
Yeah.
But I think you're fine there.
Ant-Man for Haliburton. And Haliburton's an interesting one because not off to the statistical start that you would like to see so far. He has 11 total assists in 3 games. Like, Tyrese Haliburton was essentially averaging 11 assists per game last year.
Yeah, and Edwards is kind of just he's been doing what he was doing the last couple of years. Like Edwards,
Right.
I mean, his 3-point rate is crazy right now.
Right.
But I would hold Haliburton. It is a little concerning, but I think we're too early. Like guys go on 3-game cold streaks all the time.
Mhm.
So maybe that's just what this is.
Is Donte DiVincenzo a hold? Asks Elvis. I would be holding him. At 10-team league, maybe that gets a little dicier. Everywhere I have DiVincenzo, yeah, it's been disappointing, but I'm still a believer that they're going to need him maybe more than they thought they would this year. They've rebounded nicely, over the last 2 games from that face plant against the Lakers on opening night. But Mike Conley to me is somebody that you just can't necessarily ask to play big minutes and give you big contributions. They're going to need that secondary scoring. We'll see, how consistent Randall can be. Really, DiVincenzo is just off to a slow start shooting the ball right now. He's shooting 28% from 3, but he's taken a ton. I think those are going to come around. He's still going to give you steals. You got to be realistic though about the rebounding and the assist potential. Maybe not going to be all that high, but he's certainly a hold for me. I'm not giving up on DiVincenzo.
He's a hold. I mean, like you said, his shooting is going to improve, and he's like a 1 injury away a guy. It's like it's the same argument for another guy on this bench, Naz Reid, where it's like people will be like, "Well, Reed's not playing that well. Do I drop him?" It's like if Gobert gets hurt, if Randall gets hurt, like you're gonna never wish you dropped him.
We got some Donovan Clingan questions. One, is Donovan Clingan a hold? Asks Christian. And then Skeeter says, is Ayton a sell high with Rob Williams returning soon and a possible Donovan Clingan takeover later in the season?
Is Clingan a hold? I mean, 1.4 fantasy points per minute right now for Donovan Clingan. I assume if you drafted him, he was probably your last pick or your second to last pick, so he's probably sitting on your bench. I would just keep him on my bench for like as long as possible. I don't really know what the Rob Williams situation is. It would really suck if Rob Williams comes in and starts playing like 15 minutes a game and then Clingan doesn't play at all. I would hold Clingan for like as long as possible.
Yeah, it's also important to note that we don't really have much in the way of like a true update. Chauncey Billups just kind of gave a vague Rob Williams quote yesterday. He's like, yeah, he's getting back on the court. Said he's not certain when he will return. I mean, Rob Williams, even at his best, throughout his career, has just been a massive injury risk. He has not played an NBA game in almost a full calendar year at this point. So it certainly doesn't help Donovan Clingan, the specter of Rob Williams returning. Maybe they do want to play him and try to build a little bit of trade value for Rob Williams. I don't know that Clingan is going to see enough minutes anytime in the next couple of weeks that you're comfortable starting him, but I think you're right. I think he's the guy that you're terrified to drop, because even if he starts playing 19 minutes a game, it's not like we're asking for 30. Like if he could just get to 18, 19 instead of 12 or 13, he's going to be viable in a lot of formats.
On a 4-game week, I think he's startable. Maybe not in a 12-team league, but if you're in a 14 or a 16-team league, like you could start him on a 4-game week.
Yeah. We have a question regarding some centers here. Daniel Gafford or Jonas Valanciunas in a 12-team head-to-head league. Kind of a weird start so far for the Wizards, as you'd expect. Still seeing Kyle Kuzma toss up air balls. Valanciunas has played 20 and 21 minutes through the first 2 games. He has 28 total points, 13 total boards.
These guys are pretty even to me. Valanciunas has a higher ceiling, in my opinion. But like if he's not going to play, he needs the minutes. Right. And there's no indication right now that he's going to get those minutes. And like Gafford's not going to play 30 minutes a night either because he's splitting with Lively. So I'm gonna fence walk on this. And I'm gonna say if you need blocks, take Gafford. If you need points, take Valanciunas.
There we go. Eddie Buzz chimes in the chat, says the exact same thing. And I think you're right. That's not a fence walk. That's just accurate. It depends what you're looking for between those two guys. Utah Jazz here. Is Taylor Hendricks a hold in 10-team points league? Somebody that I think we were really intrigued by coming into the year, started to see more from him at the end of his rookie season. The defensive numbers have been there. He's got 4 steals, 3 blocks through his first 2 games. Shooting's been all over the place. He looked good on opening night, then he goes 0 for 6 from the field against Golden State. I want to see it through as far as the defensive potential goes, but in a 10-team league, that's a tough one.
10-team points league, I don't think you're losing your league because you dropped him, and you can probably stream in similar production. The thing is, like, he has 11% usage, and he's not really doing anything besides like he's going to take 6-7 shots a game. Probably he's going to do some rebounding, some shot blocking, but I don't think he's not a must hold.
Would you drop Bogdan for Toumani Camara in a 12 team category head-to-head league? I'm still really high on Bogdanovich. The injury sucks. He's played one game, didn't look great in the opener, and now he's going to miss a third straight game tonight. So he should be IR eligible in most formats. Keep that in mind. If you have an IR spot, you can just toss him in there. I don't know. I'm pretty high on what he could be because I think the Hawks are going to need him with no DeJounte. Even if they're bringing him off the bench, I still think he's going to play a lot of minutes. I mean, he was a 17 point per game guy. He was 1.2 steals last year. 4 rebounds a game, 3-4 assists per game. Really good free throw shooter on relatively low volume, but enough that it matters. So for me personally, if I can afford it, I'm going to try to wait it out with Bogdanovich.
Yeah, I think Bogdanovich has like top 75 upside, and Camara, for as nice as his defensive stats are, and if you need defensive stats, like sure, he's also shooting 56% from three. Like that's going to cool off. So I would keep Bogdanovich. All
right, one more Hawks question here. What's your rest of season projection for Risacher? Will he get enough minutes to be relevant with Hunter and Bogdan in the way? Obviously, those two have both been, banged up to varying degrees so far. It's really tough to say, right? I mean, Risacher is just kind of this unique number 1 overall pick. He was in the starting lineup against OKC yesterday, 13 points, 6 boards, 2 assists, 0 for 2 from 3. It's like I think that's almost, I wouldn't say the best case, but I think as he gets more reps, somewhere in the way of 10 to 13 points, 3 to 5 rebounds per game. I think the defensive stats are going to be really hit or miss night to night. It's really going to depend on how the shooting comes along, right? Because I think that's kind of the thing that you would bank on with Risacher. I don't think he's going to be starting when the Hawks are at full strength. Maybe later in the year he will. But so far he's 2 of 10 from 3.
I think there are minutes there because, in this game against OKC, they ended up playing like Vit Krejci 20 minutes and Roddy 20 minutes and Garrison Matthews 20 minutes, right? Like there's time for Risacher to play 20 to 28 minutes a game, maybe even touch 30. But if your question is what's our rest of the season projection for him? Is he relevant in a head-to-head category league? I really don't know what he's specifically doing enough for you to make him a must roster in a head-to-head category league. Like he's going to have some boom games, I think, just because he's a pretty high IQ player and there'll be some good games, right? But again, with Bogdanovich and Hunter there, it's tough for him. I don't think you have to have him in a 12-team league.
Any concerns over the two Jalens, the young Jalens in the NBA right now? Jalen Williams and Jalen Johnson, or just a slow start for those two?
Well, Jalen Williams, is one of my favorite. He's like, he was one of my favorite draft selections on draft day. I was like, you just take him in the 3rd round and don't think about it. I don't know if I would push back against that. He's on a slow start. I mean, he's averaging 19 points. Like he's basically averaging what he averaged last season.
Right.
And he's not shooting that well. I think his shooting is going to come around and all of a sudden he's at 22 points a game and everything like that. So I'm not worried about that. Jalen Johnson, on the other hand, I'm a little more worried about.
Yeah.
Now he's shooting abysmally. 30% from the field, 20% from 3, 60% from the free throw line. But the rest of his stats look pretty solid. Like he's passing the ball, he's getting his rebounds, he's getting his defensive stats. So like I really have no concerns. It's a buy low, in my opinion, on both of them if you have that option. But don't panic selling these guys. I think it's just some poor shooting.
Yeah. I think Jalen Johnson, like there's just been like weird caveats in every game. Like he, goes 4-15 from the field in the second game. He was in foul trouble early against OKC yesterday, only ended up playing 29 minutes. So I wouldn't be panicking. Both of those guys are players that I wish I would have had more of this year. And I'm not going to change that after just 1 week. We've got a lot of Jeremy Sohan questions. Sohan or Champagny, as far as the Spurs go, if you have to add one, is Jeremy Sohan a must roster right now in 12-team leagues? I'm not the biggest Jeremy Sohan believer, but minutes have been there. Played 37 minutes on Saturday against Houston, 17 and 12 with 3 assists and 2 blocks. What say you?
I think if you drafted Sohan, you hang on to him for sure. I'm with you where it's just like sometimes I watch the Spurs. It was a fun, I watched a lot of that Houston San Antonio game, and it's like I felt like he was out there doing nothing, but he finished with 17, 12, 3, and 2. He's like one of those kind of a players. So I would hang on to him. If he's on your waivers, pick him up for sure. Let it ride because Vassell is out, so they're gonna need him a decent amount. And Champagny, again, that's even more so of like a you can ride it while it's hot. But he's also shooting 50% from the field, 50% from three. He's not like, it's possible Keldon Johnson kind of steps back up, and Castle's had some decent games. So these guys are like Champagne's a short-term pickup, most probably.
Here's a good question. Better chance that Okongwu or Giddey finish as a top 100 player this year? Both off to decent starts. Okongwu still kind of coasting on that opening night game. And Giddey's essentially given you exactly what he did last year. So there hasn't been a notable jump, but I think part of that is like when the Giddey trade first went down, you're thinking, oh man, there's gonna be all this opportunity in Chicago. And then it's like, all right, well, we're gonna start Kobe White and Lonzo Ball is gonna be back in the mix. And Zach LaVine is healthy and looking like himself. So it's not quite as well positioned, I guess, for Josh Giddey to just kind of own this offense as maybe we initially thought.
Another fence walk for me. I think these guys have like very similar sort of like, chances of being in the top 100. For Giddey, it's just more so. I mean, he's actually kind of has a minutes question as well because he's playing. Right. And Kobe White's going to have his usage and Vucevic as well. But if you're trying to, I guess if your question more generally is like, which of these guys would you rather have? I think it's entirely league dependent.
Yeah.
Like if you need big man stats, obviously Okongwu. If you need guard stats, Giddey. In a points league where it kind of doesn't matter, I think I would actually rather have Giddey just because he's more likely to touch the ball and get assists and stuff like that. But it's very close.
Question for me to you: any Wembanyama concerns so far this season? He's only played 2 games. But he's firing away from 3. He was 1 of 8 from beyond the arc on opening night. I saw a tweet that somebody's like, the NBA is lucky that Wembanyama has chosen the Durant path as opposed to the Olajuwon path. And, again, we're 2 games in. The Spurs have 1 loss to Dallas, 1 win over Houston. He had 3 blocks in the Houston game, 29 and 7, but just 2 total assists so far. Doesn't have a steal. Jokic also off to a slug-ish start, but by his standards. But we have not had that insane Wemby game where it's like, all right, this is why you justified taking him number 1 overall.
I mean, I kind of agree with that tweet, even though it is in jest. I will say they like posted him up a decent amount against Houston, kind of from like the elbow. But then Houston would send a double team, and I felt like Wembanyama was not necessarily making the best reads out of the double team. He was not punishing smaller players for being on him. Like he was not just taking the 12-foot jump hook that he should be taking. But I say that about literally every 7-foot player in the NBA. It is, I wouldn't say it's concerning, but it's sort of like there are still some concerns about like this team is just so bad around him that I think teams are going to sell out to stop Wembanyama, and they're going to let Julian Champagny try to score 20 points, and they're going to let Sohan take terrible 3-pointers and all that stuff. So I do think they need to force him inside a little bit more, but I'm not like panicking or anything.
So David asks, is Jaden Ivey a hold this season? I mean, I think he has to be right now, right? It's like this is essentially a best case scenario start, I would say, for Jaden Ivey, somebody that I for the most part stayed away from. I think he's over the last couple of years at least, he's shown some upside. It's always tough to discern with Detroit, but I kind of thought he would be a more valuable real life asset than fantasy. But he's never going to be a great free throw shooter. That's always the kind of the downside for him, especially by guard standards. He's low to mid 70s as far as that goes. And he takes a ton. He's been getting to the line like 7 times a game so far. But he's shooting almost 50% from the field. He's got back-to-back 20-plus point games. He's giving you assists. He's giving you rebounds. If I have Jaden Ivey, I'm just hoping that I started him last week. I'm certainly not trying to get off him.
He's been good. I mean, he was someone I tried to grab late in drafts as well. I think I was banging the drum a decent amount on that. Big leverage point for the Pistons was him being good and him playing 30 minutes a night, working alongside Cade. And like you might look at the 8-cat rankings and be like, hey, this guy's ranked 170. What gives? Like you said, his free throw percentage, like we know the weaknesses with Ivy. His free throw percentage, he doesn't get defensive stats. But at that point, you just take the 20 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists for what it is, and you get the defensive stats elsewhere, and you get the free throw percentage elsewhere. Like absolutely hold Ivy.
Yeah. We got a lot of questions throughout the show about Nick Richards as well. Are you comfortable grabbing him? Are you scared that the moment you pick him up, all of a sudden Mark Williams is back? We are still, this is going on, what, 9 months now of Mark Williams being game to game?
I mean, just roster Richards for the time being. Like, don't drop anybody crazy for him, but he's playing 30. He's basically playing 30 minutes a night and putting up a double, and he's very active around the basket. LaMelo's going to feed him the easiest dunks in the world. So pick Richards up and just enjoy it while it lasts.
I'm with you on that, man. I'm with you on that. We saw it for a lot of last season. He's going to give you kind of the Zubac numbers, but with more blocks potential, which we like. He'll shoot threes every now and then as well. Reasonable free throw shooter. I'm good with him. Got a few questions about Draymond. Any concerns for Draymond Green? He's off to a slow start. I am never a Draymond drafter. I probably paid for it, in the past because he does tend to, finish higher than you would think in fantasy rankings. But yeah, it's not been a fantastic start for Draymond. He's no longer a block per game guy. That kind of tapered off 3 or 4 years ago. Still should give you steals. And I think he's another player where you just have to be realistic, right? Where it's like you see he's averaging like 4.5 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal. I mean, he's getting up there in age, man. He's 34. He's somebody who, plays extremely hard. He's going to be impacted if the Warriors keep running this deep rotation. Like Draymond Green at 23 minutes per game is not going to be overly valuable for fantasy. And, I think him and Curry are the two guys. It's like, do they make an exception for those two, right? It's like, if you want to run this deep rotation, that's all well and good. But if you want to beat good teams, I don't think you can necessarily live with Draymond and Curry on that restriction.
Well, I think a huge part of Draymond's game was just his chemistry with Curry and Clay. And that's kind of like Curry's going to be out for a while. Clay is gone. And that's how he was so easily able to rack up like 6, 7, 8 assists a game, even last year, the year before.
Yep.
And obviously his defensive stats weren't what they used to be. And now they're putting traditional bigs next to him all the time. Looney's been playing Trace Jackson Davis, so his rebounds are lower.
Yep.
Obviously, Draymond's not shooting the ball anymore. So like, I don't even think you have to hold him. Like if you're in a 12 team and you drafted him, like pick 100, pick 120, yep. I don't really think you need to hang on.
Do have an update on Steph Curry, by the way. Shams Charania just tweeted about this. So he's gonna sit out Tuesday and Wednesday. It's a back-to-back, so that makes sense. Will be reevaluated on Friday, so that could maybe place him back for Saturday against Houston. Either way, if you're in weekly leagues, too risky. 1 game max at this point. So make sure he's on your bench this week. We'll hit a couple more and then we'll get out of here. Anime Guy Gaming says, do you sell Andrew Wiggins high? Is he really back? LOL. I think appropriate to put the LOL in here because we are talking about Andrew Wiggins. What do you think?
I think he was a fine flyer on draft day. And with Curry out for a couple games and potentially longer, I think this is why you drafted Wiggins, and this is you hold him now. Whether or not you sell high depends how high. I mean, if you can get a top 100 player for him, I would strongly think about that. And when I say top 100, I mean like basically guaranteed, proven top 100 talent, not like this guy's top 100 through 3 games. So yeah, I would sell high if you could get top 100 for him. Otherwise, just hold it and enjoy if he can play well while Curry's out.
All right, this is a good one. Who do you like more in a points league, De'Aaron Fox or Evan Mobley going forward?
I mean, gut feeling is Fox.
Yeah.
But Mobley's been playing well. I mean, I don't want to like make this too simple, but just like generally what I'll say for points leagues is like, just look at their fantasy points per game. And unless one guy is shooting like extremely well, like unsustainably good or unsustainably bad,
yeah,
it's sort of just like whoever's averaging more and whatever fits your roster.
Yeah.
They're both playing really well right now.
Yeah. And you're essentially taking free throw percentage out of it for 2 guys who are minuses in free throw percentage. I will say with Mobley, I mean, I'm already having regrets not kind of banking on the breakout for him. They have played Toronto, Detroit, and Washington. It's like this is like the easiest possible schedule to begin the year. I think the opposition to that would be, probably play more minutes and more competitive games, but they've blown out all 3 of those teams, and those are all very blockable teams, by the way. I think Toronto got blocked like 10 times in the opener. 10 times. Think about it. Like everybody on the Cavs is racking up blocks. So something to keep in mind. I have Sexton and Keontae George. Which one should I get rid of?
You
gotta get rid of one.
You have to get rid of one. I understand if you're like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know. This is a tough question. I mean, I will say, like, okay, Keontae George is shooting 23% from the field.
been bad.
That will improve, but he was also not an efficient shooter last year. Like, is Keontae George miraculously going to become a 47% field goal shooter when he was 39% last year? Fair question. Do you have a strong preference on this one?
It's
I would
safety versus upside. It's like Keontae George is clearly the upside play. Sexton is kind of just points. He's going to be a lot more efficient. I don't know. I would probably just hold Keontae for another week.
Like, if this is a long-term question, I mean, Keontae's less likely to be sat in March and April if you have a tanking concern. So that's sort of, I'm gonna use that as a hedge.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, they could trade Sexton at some point too. I don't think that's necessarily off the table. All right, we'll do a couple more. 12-team league, pick 2 to start this week. Camara, Dylan Brooks, Gradey Dick, Caris LeVert, Trey Mann. Those are your options, Alex.
Probably LeVert and Trey Mann. I don't know the game count off the top of my head. I apologize, but assuming 3-game weeks for pretty much all these guys, I mean, LeVert and Trey Mann are the guys who are going to be handling the ball and have the highest upside because of that. So that's how I would approach that.
Yeah, 4-game week for the Cavs, 3-game week for the Hornets. Portland is on a 4-game week.
I mean, the reason you have LeVert is to play him on a 4-game week when someone is out and Strus is out. So, like, this is the exact situation you want to play LeVert in.
All right, we're getting bombarded with Santi Aldama questions, so we'll end there. Santi Aldama worth holding, even though Jaren Jackson is back. 12-team category league. I know a lot of people are adding Aldama. I think did we not go through this at the beginning of last year? Didn't Aldama just like come out on fire over the first week of last season too?
Aldama is at the very, very top of my list of players I wish I could ban from fantasy so I don't have to talk about them anymore. Like Aldama, Malcolm Brogdon, like these guys, I wish I could just have a league where like they don't exist. It would just be so much easier. Hold him because their rotation is pretty thin. Like they have a lot of guys hurt. So even though Jaren Jackson is back, like, yes, he could still, he being Aldama, could still play a decent amount of minutes because like Brandon Clark hasn't been that good in his 18 minutes. Like maybe he replaces some Laravia and Jay Huff and Jalen Wells. So Jalen Wells. So yeah, I would hold Aldama, but don't expect anything. It might not be a long term.
Yeah, I mean, he's 19 of 28 from the field in his 2 good games, 0 of 2 in the other. I look at his game log, and it's probably going to be this alternation of like, all right, he goes for 20 with 7 rebounds, and then the next night he has 4 points in 22 minutes. Like, you know, you're signing up for it. And I do think there is a through line with Edey too. It's like the less minutes that Zach Edey plays, the more fouls that he racks up, you know, the more we probably see Aldama working in behind Jaren Jackson. So it kind of depends. Like if you're fading Zach Edey, or if you think Zach Edey can stay on the court for 22 minutes a night, it's kind of a one or the other situation. Because if Edey's playing more minutes, then Aldama's going to be capped.
Right. 100%.
All right. Taryn says, just traded for Haliburton, sent out Vucevic and Miles Bridges in a head-to-head 9-cat league. What do you think? Getting Haliburton for Vucevic and Miles Bridges.
I think I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. I don't know how many, I'm going to assume your team's a 12-teamer or your league's a 12-teamer, but I like the upside of getting Haliburton, and hopefully you can stream in some other guys and make up for the other production. Yeah,
I mean, this is the ultimate buy low, right, on Haliburton.
Yes.
Who's just, struggled from the field. He had the 0 of 8 game against the Knicks. The 3-point shooting is, he started the year 1 for 16 from beyond the arc. Like we mentioned earlier, he has 4, 5, and 2 assists so far. If you look at how many games did he have last year under 5 assists, the answer is 6. And if you want to say, how many games did he have with 5 or fewer assists? 11. So he's already had 3 games to begin the year. That would have been 3 of his worst fantasy games of the entire season. I don't think Tyrese Haliburton just took a huge step back over the offseason. For the most part, the Pacers are bringing back the same team. I know you're mixing in Mathurin, but I think this is the definition of a nice buy low trade.
I'm with you. People are definitely going to panic sell on Haliburton. I think that's the right gamble to take.
All right, we're going to shut it down there. Appreciate all the great questions, guys. We'll be doing this every Monday throughout the NBA season. We'll always come prepared with some takeaways, but, as if you've watched this podcast or listened to it over the last couple of years, we tend to get derailed by all these fantastic questions, but that's a credit to you guys because you allow us to talk about a ton of players and, essentially hit all the guys that we wanted to hit anyway. So keep those questions coming. If you're watching this live on YouTube, you can find it archived, of course, on the YouTube channel. You can also find it in podcast form on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your pods. I want to thank all of our sponsors. I want to thank everybody for listening and watching along. We'll be back tomorrow. Myself and Brandon Kravitz will give you a recap from Monday's slate. We'll talk more week 1 takeaways. We'll have Mike Barner and Kirian Sprecher hosting the pod every Wednesday. And then if you want the full waiver wire breakdown every Friday, Alex Barutha, Ken Kreitz, and Shannon McCune will be handling that. Alex, good stuff as always, man, and we'll chat soon.